We're going to get there. We're going to get there. Hi, everyone. My name is Jess McCracken. I'm the whole community readiness coordinator for Pinellas County Emergency Management. That is a very fancy way of saying I get to do all the education and outreach for our communities. So the really cool thing about my job is I get to meet all different types of people from all different parts of the county, which really gives me a really good perspective of what people are experiencing around Pinellas County, especially after the 2024 hurricane season. So as we're going out and doing outreach, we're conducting mini listening sessions where we're getting feedback on folks' experiences after Debbie, Helene, and Milton. And so some of that feedback has been very enlightening, but also being added to our after action in terms of making our new plans for the season. So I see several people that have been involved in some of those listening sessions. So thank you for your feedback. And also I apologize if you have to listen to my presentation again today. So I will try to make it as painless as possible. So the messaging for hurricane season preparedness has not changed. We still want folks to know their risk, make a plan, and stay informed. And by know your risk, we mean know your zone. So know your evacuation zone, but also know your home. So know what your home is vulnerable to. Here in Pinellas, we have storm surge, which is obviously that water that's rapidly pushed onto land by winds from a storm. And when we're talking about evacuation zones, something that I've recognized through outreach is that folks don't necessarily understand that evacuation zones are built on storm surge models. So storm surge models are really the only thing that, not the only thing, but our evacuation zones are based on storm surge models, meaning we're not taking into account those rain bands, those wind bands necessarily. We're saying if you are in an evacuation zone, you are susceptible to impacts from storm surge waters. Storm surge is life-threatening. It can destroy homes. It's very rapidly moving. If anybody has seen any of the videos from storm surge from Helene, it is very scary. It came in fast and it came in fierce, and it is very fast moving, very rapid, and very life threatening. So we always say run from the water, hide from the wind. What we don't want is folks to say, hey, I'm just going to stick it out and see how bad the weather gets, because that timing is something you're just not going to be able to get more of. Once it's too late to leave, it can get very dangerous very fast. So we need folks to understand, if you are in an evacuation zone and you are ordered to evacuate, please heed the warnings. There are lots of factors that are taken into consideration, and we understand it's scary to leave. Folks don't want to leave their furry babies, don't want to necessarily go to an emergency shelter. We understand it's not a cruise ship, it's a lifeboat, but it is a safe place to ride out the storm. So really take those warnings seriously. Another hazard that we have to deal with here is flood, and flood can happen any time throughout the year. So your flood zone and your evacuation zone are not the same thing, and it's very important that you understand both. You understand your risk from flood during times of tropical storm events or hurricanes, but you also understand your flood risk. So knowing both your flood zone and your evacuation zone are very important. For those that aren't really familiar with looking at these types of photos, the picture on the bottom, that's actually a water line. So that's a water line from how high the surge got. And, some of the pictures are absolutely incredible, but a picture's worth 1,000 words. And I think this one really does say a lot. So I always hear people, let me give a little background. I came from the dark side before my home in EM. I came from insurance. So I always have to kind of turn my hat around and say, from the insurance perspective, I always hear my home is not in a flood zone. So the entire state of Florida is in a flood zone. Pinellas County is surrounded by water on 3 sides. So there is always potential to flood. Now, if you live in a low risk to moderate risk flood zone, that means you live in a preferred flood zone. That's what it's called in the insurance world. Usually those are flood zone B or flood zone X, not to get too technical, but um, just because your mortgage company doesn't require you to carry flood insurance doesn't mean you're not in a flood zone. It just means you're in that low risk to moderate risk flood zone. 25% of all flood claims come from that moderate to low risk zone. You don't have to live in a high risk zone to be affected. You know, 1 inch of water can cause more than $25,000 worth of damage to a home. So no matter where you're located, no matter what your flood zone is, have that conversation with your insurance professional to assess your risk. And I'll get off my insurance soapbox now. Another hazard that we have to deal with here in Pinellas and during storms is our wind risk. The tornado activity during Milton was something pretty interesting. There were 46 tornadoes that touched down in Florida. 27 of the tornadoes had winds over 111 miles per hour. So very scary stuff. I didn't realize that there was this myth that tornadoes cannot happen during hurricanes. It's actually pretty common for tornadoes to happen during hurricanes. So also another hazard that we need to be looking out for. Knowing the risks that are associated with your location or what type of structure you live in. We have a lot of condos here in Pinellas County. The barrier islands, you're in evacuation zone A, so you're always asked to evacuate when that order is called. If you live in a mobile home community or a community that has RVs, obviously you are kind of before zone A, but technically a zone A. You must always evacuate when an evacuation order is called, and that has to do with the winds. These homes are not strong enough to sustain those high impact winds. I hear when I'm doing presentations in mobile home communities that my house was built up to the newest codes, and that's fantastic. What that means is that there is a chance that you may come back and you may still have your house there, but those building codes that go with the newer mobile homes were not meant for you to ride out a storm in your mobile home. So the mobile home is not built up to code to withstand another mobile home hitting it. So please, 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 if you live in a mobile home community, we always ask that you evacuate when an evacuation order is called. We have some folks that are liveaboards or, want to try to ride out the storm on their boats. That is also not a good idea. It's also very important that you know how to tie up your boat and secure it safely so we don't see boats in yards after the storm. Of course, we want to plan ahead for everybody. Once you know your risk, by knowing your home and knowing your zone, it's easier than to make your plan. And you know who you have to take care of, you know who you have to plan for. So our furry animals, we want to make sure that we take them with us, obviously, that they're microchipped just in case they are lost in a storm. We're able to find them after. We've got 3 different types of shelters. I'll get into that in a minute, but if you've got somebody that you take care of that could be eligible to go to a special needs shelter, I always give the guidance of call the emergency management office and ask the questions. There is an application that we can go through with you to kind of talk through some of that. I had a situation where a woman says, well, I always go to my brother's house, but last year my brother was out of town when the storms came. But I had been thinking about registering, so now she's calling as the storm is coming to register. That's the last thing we want to do. That is not, that's a non-plan. So we want folks to call, have those conversations, even if it is to get registered for special needs, because you know that you qualify to go to that shelter. And then let's say brother is in town during the storms. When you get the call to say, hey, we're going to come get you around this time, you can always decline and just say, hey, my other plan came through. I have somewhere safe to go. But we definitely want those registrations to happen now. And part of our plan needs to be securing your home. So I kind of think about this in 2 phases, the blue skies phase and then the as the storm is coming phase. So the blue skies phase are things that take a little bit longer to do. We don't want to be cutting wood to cover our windows or trying to cut trees as the storm is rolling in. So keep your trees trimmed during hurricane season. For vehicles, I always like to keep my gas tank half full during hurricane season. I'm really, really bad about getting gas. Like I've actually looked up on my phone how many miles do I have once my gas light turns on. You can ask my husband. I am the worst. But during hurricane season, I always try to get in the habit of keeping my gas tank half full. But a good way to remember how to secure your home is remember the ABCs: anchor, brace, cover, strap. Anchor anything down that can be picked up by the wind. If you can pick it up, the wind can pick it up. Brace has to really do with that garage door. So talking to either the manufacturer or somebody from like a Home Depot or Lowe's to figure out the best way to brace the type of garage door that you have. Cover your windows, doors, anything that can let that wind and water into your home, and then strap. So strap down any sort of loose structure. So we have a barn in the back of our house. We would take ratchet straps and put it over just because it's something that we actually had to build. It has shingles on it, but they're obviously not hurricane rated. So making sure that our barbecue grills are inside, taking everything inside that can be picked up. We have a campaign for our mobile home communities, no gnome left behind, because those gnomes are adorable, but going 90 miles an hour towards your car, not very much fun. So if you have folks that leave, their snowbirds, they leave for this time of year, make sure that they're preparing their homes ahead of time so it's not the property manager's responsibility to be going around and doing those things. And then for our evacuation, we have a few options that we recommend: a host home, which is the home of a friend or a family member, and non-evacuation, hotel, motel, Airbnb. We have county operated shelters, and then out of the area. So out of the area, we say go tens of miles, not hundreds of miles. You don't have to go very far. You can see the evacuation map here on the slide. Any of the areas in white are non-evacuation zones. So anywhere kind of towards the middle of Pinellas County. And again, mobile homes, we always ask that you evacuate. PSTA gives free rides to shelters. Pets are allowed to come on the buses. Make sure that the smaller pets are in crates. The larger pets, larger dogs have a muzzle and a leash. Service stops when the conditions become dangerous. So at a certain point, we have to pull first responders off the road. Same thing with PSTA. It's just not safe to continue to drive with their apparatus. Um, if you need transportation assistance, you can register with the special needs program. It doesn't mean that you're going to be going to a special needs shelter, but you can get assistance if you do not have transportation. But the key is to register now. Do not wait for a storm to be headed our way. And we have three different types of shelters here in Pinellas County. We have general population shelters, special needs shelters, and pet-friendly shelters. All of our shelters are located outside of evacuation zones. They are also located in schools. So all the food that was being served to the students will now be served to the folks that are coming to the shelter. So if you have special dietary requirements, please be prepared to bring your own food. Also, bringing supplies, we don't want you to roll in with 6 rolling suitcases, but you do need to bring those toiletries, basic essentials, and I will provide a list during the presentation that shows you some things to consider when you're going to a shelter. Oh, there it is. So here is our basic list of emergency supplies. On the left-hand side, we have a list of what everybody should really consider, regardless of what your plan is. And then the very important documents are listed on the bottom left. As you can see, there are other lists here that have additional supplies depending on what your plan is. So even if you are going to be sheltering in place because you're in a non-evacuation zone, that still takes some preparation. So there are still things that you should consider as general supplies for when you will be either returning home or if you will be sheltering in place. So very important that everybody has those supplies in their emergency kits.
And Jess, I do have a question.
Sure.
I know that we are kind of wrapping up on time here for this part of the presentation, but I want to ask if you have specific suggestions for how our unhoused neighbors can be aware of hurricane shelter openings.
Sure. So there's a couple different ways that Pinellas County communicates this information, and that is through our BEES program, so our electronic billboard program. We will put that there is a hurricane coming, shelters are opening, evacuation orders have been called. And I know that some of the folks that are unhoused have access to phones in some cases, but also dealing and getting the information to the agencies that serve these communities so they can then share with the clients as they see them throughout the week to let them know, hey, you can get to PSTA to get free rides to shelters and, help them with the supplies potentially that they would need to go to a shelter.
Thank you. That is incredibly helpful. Really very, very much appreciate that. If anybody else has any other questions for Jess or Pinellas County Emergency Management, please go ahead and put those in the Q&A box, and we will pay attention to that. Jess, you should have access to that Q&A box as well. You should be able to answer questions directly in there, and we will, of course, come and we will have the Q&A session at the end of this. Is there anything else that folks should know before we pass the mic to Ms. Bates?
I know it's like drinking from a fire hose. It's a lot of information when we're asked to talk in like 10 or 15 minutes. So I will share the presentation with the group so that can be emailed out. And then share also some of the events that we have coming up to share with your clients to get folks information about preparedness.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jess.
Thank you for
Really,
having
really
us.
appreciate that. So that's wonderful, great news about hurricane preparation. Hurricane season does run through November 30th. So we are already started. We are already in the middle of it. So it is time to get prepared and to ensure that our community is prepared. So thank you. Up next,